We are about a week away from the regular season starting. The Brewers opening up in New York. They've named their starting pitcher. They've made a few cuts. We'll talk about all that. John Pappadopoulos from ESPN in Lacrosse, from the Sports Lead. Great talk show up there. We'll talk to him coming up next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good to have you along. Yes, we are looking and churning ahead to the regular season, the 162 games. But you know what? As I told John before we started the show, every game matters. He knows that. And we'll talk to him about the upcoming season coming up here in a little bit, and some moves that the Brewers have made, maybe some that they haven't made. All that ahead. Chuck Freeman here, second-year host of Locked On Brewers, longtime sportscaster here in the state of Wisconsin. And of course, you get us on Google, Spotify, Apple. We're on all the major downloads. Go to your YouTube page, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. And we're getting right down to it as the team is firming itself up, ready to head north. John Pappadopoulos joining us right now. You get him on the Sports Lead, 3 to 6 on ESPN Lacrosse, 105.5, longtime sportscaster, big baseball guy. I'm on a show Mondays at 4:30. So I asked him, hey, man, can you reciprocate? Can you come on our show before your show today? And it was great getting him aboard. John, thanks for coming on.
Hey, great to be here.
You know, it's you're a baseball guy. I learned that from being on your show here in the last 4 or 5 weeks. You're a baseball guy, number one. You dig down in the weeds. You do your homework just like the rest of us. But, and I was like, man, I enjoy coming on his show. And you've done minor league baseball as well. Yeah.
Single A ball early in my career, was in the Northwoods League for many years with the Loggers. Mm-hmm. We were talking a little before we started here. Those years with the Loggers were the best years of my life. I loved it. There was nothing like it. I did AAA baseball for a time with the Cardinals. So I think it's the greatest game in the world. The NFL is a better television product. I love football. I love college football. The NBA is great. March Madness is great this time of year, but there's nothing like baseball. I think it's the best game there is. I think it's the best game to follow. It's the best game to read about. And we were talking about this too. The rhythms of the game lend itself to, you can socialize a little bit if you want. You don't have to watch every inning of 162. I think it's the best game in the world, and I can't wait for another season.
John, you could ask me about regular season games, about the NBA, and I was like, oh, God, I barely remember that. But ask me where I was on a Sunday in July, and I could tell you details. What is it about baseball in 162 games? Like I said before I brought you out here, every game matters. Nothing against the NBA, but, man, it seems like with 162, twice as many games, there's more memorable games in Major League Baseball, and you would think there'd be less that you'd remember.
Yeah, there are, and I think it's pennant races. Even though there's more wild card teams now and you don't have to win your division, there's something about winning your division in baseball that I think is different. Basketball doesn't, the NBA doesn't really have that. Mm-hmm. There's something about that, and there's something about a pennant race, about watching the Cardinals and Cubs if you're a Brewer fan, or watching the Brewers and Cubs if you're a Cardinal fan, or whatever the case is. Are the Reds going to be a little better this year? You kind of get locked into your division. And it's a little mini horse race. And I think for a lot of us, it goes back to being kids. Mm-hmm. And, we're going to sound like dinosaurs now, but, you'd open up your newspaper and look at the standings and say, okay, we're 2.5 back, and whatever your team was. And that horse race of a pennant race is what makes every game feel bigger than it probably even is in baseball. But it does seem like they're all big for some reason.
It's amazing. You touched on the standings there. I couldn't tell you what place the Bucks are in the Eastern Conference right now. Yeah. I know they got a lot of wins, but every day I'm looking at the baseball standings up. We're 3.5 games out. It could be like late April, but I'll know where the Brewers are, how many games out. And not just me, you and everybody else. You just kind of know where they are every day.
Well, and it's still hard to get in baseball. It's a lot easier than it used to be to get into the playoffs, but it's hard to get in, and you are rewarded for winning your division as well. Even if your record is lower than maybe a wild card team that won 4 more games but didn't win their division. So there's an emphasis on winning that division. And you're right. Nobody's looking at the Bucks and saying, well, in the division, here's where they stand. You know why? Because the Bucks are going to get in. They're going to be a top 3 or 4 seed, and it's going to come down to them and the Celtics probably in the playoffs. Like you know that right now. You knew that back in December. And baseball has more of a randomness to it. And it's a little bit more of a marathon, I think. So it is different. But that's the one good thing about the way baseball is set up. I think I got a friend behind me there.
Kid or a dog?
A cat.
A cat. Oh, a cat. Oh, geez.
Junior the cat.
Well, they're always curious,
Yeah, oh, yeah. He might join us here in a second. But I just think there's something about that pennant race in baseball and the fact that at least, even though baseball's maybe added more teams than we'd like to the playoffs, you're rewarded for winning your division. So that's why I think they all seem like they matter a little bit more.
John Pappadopoulos joining us from ESPN Lacrosse. He's on 3 to 6, and I'm on the show actually on Mondays at 4:30. Very fortunate to be on his show. All right, now before we get in the cuts and some of the things shaping up, how do you feel about this offseason that the Brewers have as we're about a week away from opening day?
Confusing. I thought when Rhys Hoskins signed, they're going for it, and then Wade Miley comes back. Now they're going for it. When those two guys signed, I thought it was going to be a go for it year. And then maybe if you're out of it or it's close in July, that's when you would trade a Corbin Burns, maybe a Willy Adames. And then they trade Corbin Burns, which made me think, well, why spend the money on Rhys Hoskins at this point? Unless they want to flip him in July and get some more prospects. Sometimes that's a formula that teams will do
Which they probably will do if they're not in the race, right? I would guess, yeah.
Yep. I mean, the Royals do that a lot. They'll sign a veteran knowing we're not winning this year, but we can make our team respectable, sell some tickets, and then we're going to flip this guy in July. So maybe that's why they did that. But I was confused. It felt like a team that had more balance than they've had in a long time when they signed Hoskins after having brought Miley back and Burns was still in the mix. To me, Chuck, it felt like 1 to 26, it was the best roster they've had maybe since the year that they went to the NLCS Game 7 against the Dodgers. And I would argue this team might have been better because, remember, the pitching wasn't that good yet then. That was really before Woodruff and Burns bubbled up. So I thought this team was easily set to win the division at that point, in a weak division. And then they trade Corbin Burns, which I know they're going to say, well, we need to reset. We're a small market. They brought in 2 guys that might be good. DL Hall has been wild a lot as a minor leaguer. Sometimes pitchers figure that out. But right now, to me, he's still a project. And I think Joey Ortiz is a nice player, but he's probably a super utility guy. So they may have traded the best starting pitcher in franchise history with another year of control left for a utility player and a lefty reliever. And maybe DL Hall starts long-term and settles in and figures it out. But I'm really confused would be my best description of what they did.
Well, it sounds like DL Hall could be the number 2 starter because Miley's – Miley, I'd be surprised if he's be able to give her a go in that first week. We'll see. But, I mean, DL Hall, they're throwing him right in the fire as a number 2 starter. That tells me about kind of what you're talking about. That pitching staff was so good a year ago, and now guys have all been bumped up. And DL Hall, who would have been fortunate to make the rotation last year, he probably would have been a back of the rotation guy. Now is an upper rotation guy by default.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I think one of the reasons he's in this rotation is because they traded Corbin Burns for him. And, it's kind of like we have to justify that trade somehow.
Yeah.
Don't forget, when Corbin Burns came up and Woodruff came up, they were bullpen guys for almost 2 years. That was the Brewers' formula, and that's where DL Hall should be right now. Again, he's going to struggle with his control at times still. He's got a phenomenal arm. I mean, he's electric, and he might be an ace one day. But I feel like they're rushing him as a starter. But I think they feel like they have to do it because they traded Burns and they got him back, and they need to justify that trade. So, to me, if you're developing that guy properly, he's like a 7th inning guy or a lefty matchup guy. Then you stretch him out a little bit, and maybe in August he's in the rotation. The same way they develop their other great pitchers. Again, it might get ugly. I don't know if DL Hall can give you 6 or 7 innings right now. because I think there's going to be a lot of base runners. I think he's going to walk guys. I think he's going to get behind accounts and give up a lot of hard contact eventually. He's probably going to strike a lot of guys out. He's probably going to be electric at times, but it's going to be a lot of highs and lows right now for him, I think.
John, hang on. I got to take my first commercial break. Chuck Freeman here, Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. John Pappadopoulos is joining us from ESPN in Lacrosse, and we're going to continue chatting about the cuts the Brewers have just made and how things are firming up for the team as they get ready to head north. All right, this show is brought to you in part by the good folks over at PrizePicks. I'm going to tell you about PrizePicks and how good it is and what it's all about. Football season is over, but that doesn't mean you can't get in all the action with PrizePicks. PrizePicks, the action on the floor is heating up. Tournament season is right here. The fight for playoff home court as well. No shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get on the excitement with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can put your knowledge on hoops into some serious cash. You can win 100 times your money. PrizePicks with as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 100. $100 into even more than that. NBA, NHL, college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And you can play to your strengths. You know, if you have let's say you have an eye on a couple of different players out there that you've been following here, and you like them, maybe you like Giannis or you like LeBron in certain matchups. Just, hey, go to PrizePicks and put that knowledge into use. They offer injury insurance as well. So if your player does not play, they give you some insurance on that as well. So what you need to do is go to PrizePicks, and you got to look at it and look at it a way to, hey, how can I get some investment here? Download the app, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, and that first deposit match up to $100 is going to be there for you. Deposit up to $100, they're going to match it for $100. And again, pick less and win more. That's the way it is with PrizePicks. And with PrizePicks, again, you may like Steph, you might like Caitlin Clark to go off here in the tournament. You might want to parlay that with like LeBron. How many assists he might get a game, something like that. There's so many different ways to go, but the money is there for you to possibly win with PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports, but you can't do it without downloading the app. Use that promo code LOCKEDONMLB for your first deposit up to $100. They will match it. Well, that's with PrizePicks. And again, with all the action coming up here in the next days, you're going to want to get on. Chuck Freeman here, Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Follow me along on Twitter, Chuck Freeman, FREIMUND. We're coming right back after this timeout. Welcome back to Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman, your host. John Pappadopoulos joining us. Great to get him aboard here on Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day from ESPN and Lacrosse. And, the cuts that they made the other day, Tyler Black is one of them. Mizorowski has been, we knew he was going to start the year in AA. Anything surprise you of those initial cuts? And there's Pat Murphy said the other day. He says, well, we could make some cuts right now, but that doesn't mean that these guys are going to stay down in the minors for long. This is a very fluid roster, just like last year.
No surprises for me. As we've learned over the years, the best 26 don't make it every year to start. Mm-hmm. It's the guys who have options that go down and the guys who don't have options that you keep. And it's smart. You want to be able to stash your guys who have options left in the minors. It might only be for a week or so. Robert Gasser is a good example of that. Robert Gasser is probably good enough to be one of the 5 starting pitchers. He's probably better than at least 1 or 2 of the guys who are going to be in the rotation, but he's got options. So you kind of save a roster spot and, start somebody else to begin the season. Tyler Black wasn't a surprise either. I just don't know if there's enough at-bats for him right now in the big leagues. I think he's good enough to be on the team. I think he'll be up at some point very soon. Mizorowski is just not ready yet. Mizorowski has very few minor league innings, relatively speaking. And I think they look at Mizorowski as a potential number 1 or number 2 guy. You don't want to screw with that right now. You want to get him the proper seasoning. And right now, Mizorowski, I don't believe is a starter in terms of right this second. I think he's more of a relief pitcher. He's more of a 2-pitch guy. Not to get too deep in the weeds, but Keith Law, who does a great job with baseball and prospects, brought up a good point when he did his top 100. He said, I can't put Mizorowski in the top 50 because he's a reliever right now. But he might be a great starter. So I'm not surprised they sent him down to A, stretch him out, and B, let him sort of develop that third and fourth pitch a little bit more. So all the guys that got sent down, pretty understandable. Now, Joey Weimer, we'll see. That's going to be an interesting one. Blake Perkins is an interesting one. I think Blake Perkins has made a case to be on this team. So there'll be some more controversial ones, I guess, or semi-controversial ones. But I would say no surprises so far because the best 26 don't make it. It's the best 26. In some cases, guys who don't have options, and you got to keep them.
Now, Eric Haase, it's funny. His name, I get mixed up all the time because I know a friend of mine who's I golf with spelled the same way. It's Hayes. And then I know there's a restaurant by us or a meat place called Haase. It's spelled the same way. Got multiple pronunciations of this name. But Eric is, well, you know, he's going to be the third catcher on this team. He's had great numbers in spring training. Now, my fright on this is, and I think I was talking about this a couple of weeks ago, is when guys make the team based on how well they are in spring training. And he's lighting up spring training for the Brewers, probably one of their MVPs down there. But do you really need a third catcher?
I think so. I don't think Gary Sanchez is ready to catch even somewhat regularly. From a health standpoint, you never know. And he's not a great defensive catcher. Sanchez is respectable back there. He's not a butcher, but he's not a great defensive catcher. And I think Haase is better defensively. I almost feel like Haase is going to turn into what Carantini was the last couple of years, a guy who might not put up good numbers, but be a good backup catcher. Yeah, and he'll get big hits, and he's a pro up there. I feel like Haase is almost morphing into the backup catcher, and Sanchez is more so going to be your DH against left-handed pitching, maybe sometimes against righties, and catch on occasion. It's a guess. But I feel like ultimately, even if Haase doesn't make the team out of camp, I think over the course of the season, he's proven he can be a Carantini type backup. And I kind of like him. I mean, you know, he's had a nice career. I think he's going to handle the pitchers pretty well. I feel like he profiles a little more as a classic, you know, Sunday day game after a night game. You want to give Contreras a rest type of guy that you want in there.
Well, that's why I didn't understand the Gary Sanchez acquisition. I was glad when they got Haase from Detroit. I really liked him. I've always liked him. I feel like Haase, every time I put on my MLB package, the guy was coming up with a big hit for the Tigers. So then they went out and signed Sanchez. I'm like, I thought Haase was going to be the Caratini replacement.
I don't get it. We talk about it on my show all the time. I don't understand the Sanchez signing. He's going to bring some pop, you know, some right-handed pop to your lineup as a DH. But the problem with Sanchez, two issues. Number one, they paid him a lot of money. I mean, they
$7 million,
$7 million bucks for a small market team. That's a pretty good chunk for a guy that has been hurt a lot, hasn't always been reliable, doesn't have the most focus in the world as a catcher. I know I'm killing him a little bit, but now Sanchez, if he plays enough, he might hit 15, 18 home runs too. So he does bring value. But and the other problem with Sanchez, in my opinion, now this is a lot more controversial, I think Christian Yelich should be the DH. To me, they should save his knees, save his back, have a better defensive outfielder in left field. Blake Perkins is a much better defensive outfielder than Christian Yelich is right now. Sal Frelick is a much better defensive outfielder, I think, than Yelich. So you'd be better defensively without Yelich out there regularly, and you could save Yelich's body a little bit and maybe get more offensively out of him. Instead, you're stuck with Sanchez, which forces Yelich into left, which forces Frelick to third base, where he's not going to be, you know, a high-end defender and not going to give you power at third. They weirdly cornered themselves in a weird way by signing Sanchez. I don't understand it, but they're going to probably keep him long-term because they paid him, you know, and it's going to, again, it's not a crushing move, and he may give him some power, but I'm a little surprised they did it.
Yeah, I just was surprised because I thought the $7 million they could have spent somewhere else.
Totally.
Maybe invest in a third baseman.
A third baseman. They probably could have brought another starting pitcher into the mix. Probably a good reliever. They could have saved the money and for somebody else long term. So a little surprised. Yeah. Now we didn't know how good Haase was going to be this spring, but I think that $7 million could have been spent better. I think.
John, hang on. We're going to take one more final break. We come back with John Pappadopoulos. We'll talk about Jackson Chourio just turning all sorts of heads, the rave reviews he's getting down there, and who's on third. So we head down the home stretch. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Gametime is the way to go to buy tickets. I've been telling you how, you can use Gametime to buy concert tickets, sporting events. I got seats right behind the visitors' dugouts before, by going to Gametime like 20 minutes before the first pitch. And you can do that. Download the Gametime app, browse through the app, and what they have on there is you can see the view from your seat before you buy it. You know exactly where you're going to sit when you arrive. You say, oh, I'd like to sit there. Let's see how it looks. Oh, there it is. All the prices shown to you right up front, so you're knowing you're going to get a great deal before you check out. Buy your tickets in seconds with 2 taps. You don't have to go through 50 steps. And they have the tickets right up to the start of the event. Even an hour after it starts, you can get tickets right on Gametime. And just not sports, not just football, basketball, baseball, but they have concerts, comedy, theater, anything you want. A lot of great shows, concerts coming down here in the great state of Wisconsin and throughout the country. But I can speak of Wisconsin. A lot of them coming up this summer, and you can get up your good seats right through Gametime zone deals. You pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for big-time savings. So here's what you need to do for a great deal. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKED, Locked On, for $20 off your first purchase. So you buy tickets for $70, you get $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code Locked On, $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed on the Gametime app. Chuck Freeman here, John Pappadopoulos. We continue with him coming up next. Welcome back to Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman, John Pappadopoulos joining us here from Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman here. And, of course, you get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, all the major downloads, YouTube. Go to Locked On Brewers. And, of course, 3 to 6. You get it on tune in. You get it everywhere, I believe. John, your show, I've heard it on a number of different sources. You don't have to be in Lacrosse to hear it on beautiful FM, but there's other places they can get your show.
Go to the ESPN Lacrosse app. You can find it right there.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You can listen. We've had a lot more listeners last year or two from all over. We've gotten calls from people in Peru, people all over the world. I think it's people who listen that go on vacation and listen to us, but it's pretty great. Yeah, we see a lot of different people from all over Wisconsin too.
A good show is a good show. And that's the beauty of electronics today. You can hear a lacrosse show in Milwaukee or Peru or Mexico, wherever you want to go. And John's show, 3 to 6 Central Time on ESPN Lacrosse, 105.5 if you're up in the beautiful Cooley Valley. All right, let's talk about Chourio. Willie Adames was raving about him the other day and just talking about Chourio. And I know he got off to a little slow start in spring training, but seems like the only thing that's holding him back right now is his defense.
Yeah. We've I guess, been critical of some things where I have so far today, but I think the Brewers nailed this. It looks like he's going to probably play left field or right field, probably more right than left. It sounds like they're leaning toward Garrett Mitchell in center field. We'll see how it plays out. It's hard, man. Like we went back on our show, and it's not that hard. I looked at some numbers. I think the first year Ken Griffey Jr. played in center field, he was 19 years old. He hit 16 home runs. Mickey Mantle, his first year in center field, same age, was so bad they sent him back down to the minors. Willie Mays was horrible his first year. Mike Trout, really bad at 19 and early into his early 20-year-old season. So the greatest of all time, the greatest players ever at that position have come up and struggled. I think the Brewers are really doing this the right way by starting him potentially in right field. You can hide him there a little bit. It's not a glamour position. My guess would be they're going to hit him 6th or 7th in the order to maybe take the pressure off. We forget he's a man when it comes to playing baseball physically, but he's still a kid in every other way. He just turned 20 years old. So I think they're going to go slow. I don't think they're going to play him at times against, if there's a nasty righty pitching, maybe you give him a day off. Again, hit him 6th or 7th in the order. Play him in a corner outfield spot I'm not saying hide him, but he's not, a center stage and center field. So I think they're going to do this the right way. I'm excited. I think he's going to have a good year for somebody his age. But like everybody has said, right? Like Pat Murphy said this. Quentin Berry, the outfield coach, has talked about this. There's going to be some major ups and downs. He's going to have some big slumps, and you just have to kind of grind through it.
And he played infield when he first came up in 1988, in September of 88, Gary Sheffield, after Dale Swaim got hurt, broke his leg in Detroit. But then in 89, they had to send Sheffield. Now there was other issues involving Sheffield, but he was struggling at the plate. So they sent him down. So even if if Chourio gets off to a tough start, they got to send him down. I hope Brewer Nation doesn't panic on this deal.
No, not the worst thing in the world. And like you said, Sheffield is a great comp. That's the last time they've tried this, by the way. Mm-hmm. You got to go back to the late 80s, the last time they tried this. And before that, Robin Yount was the last guy. And don't forget, Robin Yount, 1974, was 18 years old. They called him up at a young age, and he struggled a little bit. Now, Yount was good enough that rookie year, but if you look at his numbers, we act like Robin Yount was an MVP at 18 or 19 years old, but he wasn't that good the first year. It took him a couple of years to figure it out. Yeah. So between Sheffield and Yount and all those other guys I mentioned, there just aren't a lot of stories of guys at 19 or maybe having just turned 20 that can play Major League Baseball. And again, we're talking about all-time greats. Yount, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Mike Trout. It's hard to do this. So if he gets sent down or if they have to put him on the bench for a couple of days and just kind of let him reset mentally, there's probably going to be a point where that happens. And you have to kind of relax, I think, as a fan and kind of budget that into your fandom this summer where that could happen at some point.
Funny story about Yount. His first 4 or 5 years, he was not a home run, not a double-digit home run hitter. No. And I believe it was Gorman Thomas one time said, warning track power. That inspired Robin to get into the weight room. Now, late 70s, early 80s, weight training wasn't a big deal. Came back in 82 and he hit 29 home runs, was an MVP candidate because he hit the weight room in the off season. So that was just when you mentioned that about Rock and Robin, I just like, he made himself.
Wow. It takes I know it's a weird comp, but Ken Griffey Jr., outfielder, one of the great prospects of all time. He was a lot like Chourio as a prospect anyway. And even Griffey Jr., who I believe is the greatest power hitter of my lifetime. If you take the steroid guys out of it, Griffey's the best. And he's probably the best player or one of the best players I've ever seen. And he didn't hit for big power the first couple of years. I think it was 16 home runs year one, maybe 20 or 21 year two. This is off the top of my head, but it took Griffey until like the third or fourth year until he really bubbled up. And it was like year 7 before he became like a 50 home run guy, Mm-hmm. And you're right. Robin Yount was the same way. He was a singles hitter and a shortstop, who kind of had to find his way and learn major league pitching and grow into his body. So it'll take Chourio some time. There's no doubt about it. But I think he's going to help them win some games too at the same time. It's just going to be a little bit of everything.
Little patience there with the young outfielder, and I'm looking forward to watching him grow with this team. John, I got about 45 seconds or so. Opening day third baseman, who's your pick to start at third base?
If it's a left-handed pitcher, which I think it's going to be, it looks like maybe Andrew Monasterio. If not, don't rule out Sal Frelick. It'll be one of those two, I think.
Yeah, they sent Owen Miller down. I thought he had a shot at it too, but
and maybe Joey Ortiz is in that conversation. Yeah. But I think they want Frelick to play third at least against righties. So I think you're going to see him there sometimes. But Monasterio had a good camp after a good year, so I think he's one of those two. I think will be the guy.
John, before I let you go, tell me what you got coming up on the show today here all week. It's March Madness going on and all that, and as you work your way to opening day and all that, and tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
Yeah, it's really turned into a baseball March Madness week. That's kind of what's going on right now. So we've got a bunch of good guests today and tomorrow both. We're pretty stacked. Ben Wargel is going to come on, who's one of my favorite Badger guys. I mean, he's great, whether it's football or basketball. Mitchell Speltz, who's a phenomenal college basketball guy, is going to come on. We got a couple baseball guys coming on. Dave Gasper a little bit, or know the name.
Tallest baseball player in the state.
Yes, he is. Yes, 6'8". He's a big boy.
He's been on this podcast. He's got a shirt. I don't play basketball.
Yeah. Hey, ask him about it. He was a left-handed pitcher in college for a little bit.
Yes.
Not for long.
And lacrosse.
Dave's really good. So we got some good guests coming up for sure. Courtney Becker's in March Madness for the women. She's a lacrosse area kid. She's going to be on the show. So we got some good stuff coming up.
Hey, John, 3 to 6, ESPN Lacrosse. Of course, I'm on with you on 4:30 on Mondays. Appreciate always coming on your show. Hey, this won't be our last time, my friend. Have a great show today, and we'll talk to you a little bit later.
I love it, man. Thanks for having me.
Chuck Freeman here, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Again, you get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, on all the major downloads. Go to our growing YouTube page, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman, so long, everybody.